If you grew up hearing doctors, parents, and public health campaigns repeat the same advice every summer, it probably sounded something like this: don't forget your sunscreen. For decades, sunscreen has been presented as one of the most important tools for protecting our skin. Dermatologists recommend it, beaches sell it everywhere, and nearly every skincare brand promises formulas that block harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun. The logic seems simple. Sunlight contains ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet radiation can damage skin cells, and sunscreen creates a protective barrier between your skin and the sun. But over the past several years, scientists, dermatologists, and regulatory agencies have started asking deeper questions about what's actually inside some sunscreen formulas. Because sunscreen doesn't just sit on top of the skin like a shield. Many modern sunscreen ingredients are designed to absorb UV radiation, and when they absorb that radiation, they undergo chemical reactions. Those reactions convert ultraviolet energy into heat, preventing it from damaging the skin. It's an elegant piece of chemistry, but it also raises an important question. What happens to those chemicals once they are absorbed by the skin? In 2019, the US Food and Drug Administration conducted a study that surprised many researchers. The study examined several common sunscreen ingredients applied under normal usage conditions. Within just a few days, scientists detected measurable levels of those chemicals in the bloodstream of participants. That doesn't automatically mean the ingredients are dangerous, but it did show something important. Some sunscreen ingredients don't remain only on the surface of the skin. They can pass through the skin barrier and enter circulation. That discovery sparked a new wave of research around sunscreen safety. And it also highlighted a major difference between sunscreen regulations in different parts of the world. In the United States, sunscreen ingredients have not been updated as frequently as in some other countries. Meanwhile, in Europe and parts of Asia, regulatory agencies have reevaluated certain ingredients and sometimes restricted their use or required additional safety testing. Today, we're going to look at 10 sunscreen brands that have contained ingredients raising concerns among scientists and environmental researchers. Not because sunscreen itself is harmful. In fact, dermatologists overwhelmingly agree that protecting skin from excessive UV exposure is extremely important. But the type of sunscreen you choose and the ingredients it contains may matter more than most people realize. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something. Do you check the ingredient label on your sunscreen before buying it? Or do you simply trust the SPF number printed on the front of the bottle? Let us know in the comments, because the SPF rating only tells part of the story. And the chemistry behind sunscreen protection is far more complicated than most people expect. Let's begin with one of the most recognizable sunscreen brands in the world, Banana Boat. Banana Boat products are widely used at beaches, pools, and outdoor events across the United States. Many formulas rely on chemical UV filters such as oxybenzone. Oxybenzone works by absorbing ultraviolet radiation and preventing it from penetrating the skin. But oxybenzone has attracted significant scientific attention in recent years. Laboratory studies have suggested that oxybenzone may act as an endocrine disruptor in certain experimental settings. This means it may interact with hormone receptors under specific conditions. In addition, environmental researchers have linked oxybenzone to coral reef damage. When swimmers wearing sunscreen enter the ocean, small amounts of these chemicals wash off into the water. Some studies suggest oxybenzone may contribute to coral bleaching and harm marine ecosystems. As a result, several regions including Hawaii and parts of the Caribbean have restricted sunscreens containing oxybenzone. Another widely sold brand is Coppertone. Coppertone sunscreens often contain a combination of chemical filters including octinoxate. Octinoxate is effective at absorbing UVB radiation, one of the types of ultraviolet light responsible for sunburn. However, octinoxate has also been studied for potential endocrine activity in laboratory research. Like oxybenzone, it has been restricted in certain coastal regions because of environmental concerns related to coral reefs. Many manufacturers have begun producing reef-safe formulas that avoid these ingredients. But older formulas containing octinoxate were once extremely common across the sunscreen industry. Another popular sunscreen brand is Neutrogena. Neutrogena produces a wide range of sunscreens including sprays, lotions, and facial products. Some Neutrogena formulas previously used chemical filters such as avobenzone, octocrylene, and oxybenzone. Avobenzone is one of the few ingredients capable of absorbing UVA radiation, which penetrates deeper into the skin than UVB rays. But avobenzone can degrade when exposed to sunlight unless it is stabilized with other chemicals. One of those stabilizing ingredients is octocrylene, and octocrylene has recently attracted attention for a different reason. Scientists discovered that octocrylene can slowly break down into a compound called benzophenone over time. Benzophenone is classified as a possible human carcinogen in certain regulatory contexts. The amounts detected in sunscreen products remain extremely small, but the discovery sparked discussions about how sunscreen ingredients degrade over time, especially when stored for long periods in warm environments. Another brand frequently used by families is Hawaiian Tropic. These sunscreens are famous for their tropical scent and lightweight formulas, but many older formulations relied heavily on oxybenzone and octinoxate. Because of the environmental concerns surrounding these chemicals, several manufacturers, including Hawaiian Tropic, have reformulated some products to remove them. But sunscreens containing these ingredients remained widely available for years before regulatory changes began appearing in certain locations. Then there's Aveeno. Aveeno sunscreens often incorporate moisturizing ingredients such as oat extracts alongside chemical UV filters. Some formulas have included homosalate, another UV filter designed to absorb UVB radiation. Homosalate has been studied for potential hormone-disrupting effects in laboratory experiments. The European Union recently tightened restrictions on homosalate concentrations allowed in cosmetic products. In the United States, the ingredient remains permitted within specific limits. Again, this difference reflects contrasting regulatory approaches. European regulators often apply precautionary restrictions sooner when new research raises questions. American regulators typically wait for stronger scientific consensus before limiting ingredients. Another brand that has appeared in sunscreen ingredient discussions is Sunbum. Sunbum markets itself as a beach-friendly, environmentally conscious brand, but earlier versions of some products included chemical UV filters similar to those used by other sunscreen manufacturers. As public awareness about reef safety increased, many sunscreen brands, including Sunbum, introduced mineral-based formulas using zinc oxide or titanium dioxide instead of chemical UV filters. These mineral sunscreens work differently. Rather than absorbing UV radiation through chemical reactions, they physically reflect and scatter sunlight away from the skin. Because of this mechanism, mineral sunscreens tend to remain on the surface of the skin rather than being absorbed. But chemical filters aren't the only ingredients raising questions. As we continue down this list, we'll explore additional sunscreen brands and ingredients that scientists are studying closely, including compounds that degrade in sunlight, ingredients that interact with hormone receptors, and additives that may behave differently once they enter the body. Because when it comes to protecting your skin from the sun, the biggest risk may not be the sunlight alone. It may be understanding exactly what's inside the product you trust to protect you from it. In the next thread, we'll continue exploring more sunscreen brands and the surprising chemistry happening every time sunscreen is exposed to sunlight. When most people think about sunscreen, they focus almost entirely on one number, SPF, sun protection factor. SPF 15, SPF 30, SPF 50. The higher the number, the stronger the protection. At least that's what most people assume. But SPF only measures protection against UVB radiation, the type of ultraviolet light responsible for sunburn. It says nothing about UVA rays, which penetrate deeper into the skin and are associated with long-term skin damage and aging. And it definitely doesn't explain what happens chemically when sunscreen ingredients interact with sunlight on your skin. Because the moment sunscreen is exposed to ultraviolet radiation, its ingredients begin doing exactly what they were designed to do: absorb energy, convert that energy, and release it safely as heat. But that chemical reaction also means sunscreen ingredients are constantly changing as they absorb sunlight. Some filters remain stable during this process. Others gradually degrade, especially after hours of sun exposure. And this brings us to another sunscreen brand that has been widely discussed in ingredient safety debates, Eltem. Eltem sunscreens are often recommended by dermatologists and marketed for sensitive skin. Many of their products rely on zinc oxide, a mineral sunscreen ingredient. Zinc oxide works very differently from chemical UV filters. Instead of absorbing ultraviolet radiation through chemical reactions, zinc oxide acts like a microscopic mirror, reflecting and scattering sunlight away from the skin. Because of this physical mechanism, zinc oxide is generally considered one of the most stable sunscreen ingredients available. However, even mineral sunscreens have raised questions in recent years. When zinc oxide is used in nanoparticle form, the particles are extremely small, thousands of times smaller than a grain of sand. Nanoparticles allow mineral sunscreens to appear transparent on the skin rather than leaving the thick white coating older formulas were known for. But scientists continue studying whether nanoparticles behave differently in the environment or inside the body compared with larger particles. So far, most research suggests zinc oxide nanoparticles remain on the surface of healthy skin and do not penetrate deeply. But the topic remains under active investigation. Another sunscreen brand that frequently appears in discussions about ingredient safety is La Roche-Posay. This French skincare company produces advanced sunscreen formulas widely used in Europe and the United States. La Roche-Posay products often include chemical filters such as octocrylene, avobenzone, and tinosorb compounds. Some of these newer filters are not yet approved in the United States, but are widely used in Europe and Asia. This difference exists because sunscreen ingredients in the US are regulated as over-the-counter drugs rather than cosmetics, which slows the approval process. Octocrylene, as mentioned earlier, has attracted scientific attention because it can degrade over time into benzophenone under certain storage conditions. Benzophenone has been studied for potential carcinogenic effects in laboratory animals. Again, the levels detected in sunscreen products are extremely small, but the discovery sparked questions about how sunscreen ingredients change chemically when stored in warm environments like beach bags or cars. Another popular sunscreen brand is Blue Lizard. Blue Lizard sunscreens are marketed as mineral-based formulas designed for sensitive skin. Most of their products rely on zinc oxide or titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide works similarly to zinc oxide by reflecting and scattering ultraviolet radiation. However, like zinc oxide, titanium dioxide can also be manufactured in nanoparticle form. Scientists have studied whether titanium dioxide nanoparticles could generate reactive oxygen species when exposed to sunlight. These molecules are highly reactive and can potentially damage cells under certain conditions. Modern sunscreen formulas typically coat titanium dioxide particles with protective layers to reduce this effect. But the research illustrates how complex sunscreen chemistry can be. Even ingredients considered relatively safe require careful formulation to behave properly in sunlight. Another brand worth discussing is Supergoop. Supergoop sunscreens often use combinations of chemical filters designed to provide broad-spectrum protection against both UVA and UVB radiation. Some formulas contain homosalate, octisalate, and octocrylene. As we mentioned earlier, homosalate has been studied for potential hormone activity in laboratory research. Because of this, European regulators have lowered the maximum concentration allowed in cosmetic products. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean the ingredient is dangerous at approved levels, but it highlights how regulatory agencies evaluate scientific uncertainty differently. Another sunscreen widely used by families is Babyganics. Babyganics markets mineral-based sunscreens designed specifically for children. These formulas usually rely on zinc oxide. Parents often prefer mineral sunscreens for children because they sit on top of the skin rather than being absorbed. But mineral sunscreens have their own limitations. They can be thicker, harder to spread evenly, and may wash off more easily in water. That's why proper application and reapplication remain critical regardless of the sunscreen type. And finally, there's ThinkSport. ThinkSport sunscreens also rely primarily on zinc oxide. They became popular among consumers looking for reef-safe sunscreens that avoid chemical filters linked to coral reef damage. Environmental scientists have studied how sunscreen chemicals affect marine ecosystems. Oxybenzone and octinoxate have been shown in laboratory studies to harm coral larvae and contribute to coral bleaching. Because of these findings, some coastal regions have banned sunscreens containing those chemicals. However, the overall impact of sunscreen chemicals on reef ecosystems remains an area of ongoing research. Which brings us to the most important point of this entire discussion. Despite the debates around certain ingredients, dermatologists overwhelmingly agree on one thing. Sun protection is essential. Excessive ultraviolet exposure is one of the leading causes of skin cancer and premature skin aging. Sunscreen plays an important role in reducing that risk. The real conversation isn't about whether sunscreen should be used. It's about choosing the most effective and safest options available as scientific understanding evolves. Many dermatologists recommend broad-spectrum sunscreens that protect against both UVA and UVB rays. They also emphasize reapplying sunscreen every 2 hours during prolonged sun exposure. And for people concerned about chemical filters, mineral sunscreens containing zinc oxide or titanium dioxide provide an alternative. In addition, sun protection doesn't rely on sunscreen alone. Wide-brimmed hats, protective clothing, seeking shade during peak sunlight hours. All of these strategies help reduce ultraviolet exposure. Because in the end, sunscreen is just one tool in a larger system of sun protection. The sun itself isn't the enemy. In fact, sunlight plays an essential role in human health, including the production of vitamin D. The real challenge is balance. Too much exposure increases the risk of skin damage. Too little exposure can affect overall health. And sunscreen sits right in the middle of that balance. So the next time you reach for a bottle of sunscreen before heading outside, take a moment to look beyond the SPF number on the front. Flip the bottle around, read the ingredient list. And remember that protecting your skin from the sun isn't just about blocking ultraviolet rays. It's also about understanding the chemistry happening on your skin every time sunlight meets the product you trust to keep you safe.